highest exemplar of majesty among us, Sister Brenda Travis. Please stand up, Sister Brenda. Please stand up, sister. This is Brenda Travis from Macomb, Mississippi, one of the great freedom fighters of her generation. Was arrested with Ella Baker, Stokely Carmichael, that whole wave of freedom fighters. What a blessing to set eyes on you in your magnificent book, Mississippi's Exile Daughter. And you're still strong. You still got so much grace. You still got so much dignity. That's what we're here to talk about.
How do you define mental health and trauma, and how do they impact the Black community specifically?
Well, first I want to begin by saluting you and your work and your witness, though, brother, very much so. And look forward to our conversation. How do you define mental health? We're going to have a seminar tonight. I'll tell you that. First, I think there's a physical dimension to it, that you want persons who are able to have access to a quality health care so that their bodies are in shape. Because we human beings, we are shot through with a variety of different elements as organisms. You can't solely talk about the physical side, but the physical side is very important. So we begin with the physical, and then I move directly to the spiritual. You see, I think that, we're living in a moment of such overwhelming spiritual decay that even when you're in good shape physically, if your heart, mind, and soul feels empty and vacuous, and if you're living in a culture which is so much a joyless quest for insatiable pleasures, because you can get any kind of pleasure in the world, any kind of titillation, but it's still empty because it doesn't have the quality of relation or quality of community that allows you to proceed with as a person who is able to move with decency and dignity and courage. So for me, mental health has this much broader understanding. It has to do with, on the one hand, the physical condition. It has to do with a spirit intact. It has to do with a mind that is open for curiosity and critical reflection. And it has to do with cultivating the capacity to relate with others in a high quality manner. And I think that the common denominator is love. And part of the problem these days is that it's difficult to cultivate the very capacity to love in a moment of spiritual decay. So people relate to each other in transactional ways, quid pro quo. What you gonna give me, what I can give you. No, that's utilitarian calculation. It ain't got nothing to do with something good for your mental health. If you go through life with a quid pro quo mentality, you're not gonna do nothing for somebody unless they do something for you. You're gonna plateau and flatten out quick in terms of your mental, spiritual, psychic health. And the question becomes, then how do we cultivate the capacity to love? Hamlet, Shakespeare's greatest character, one of the finest and grandest figures in Western literature, he suffered from the incapacity to love. That's one reason why he got so many soliloquies. But the challenge is, if you can't treat Ophelia right, if you can't open yourself and be vulnerable to somebody else, if you can't learn how to both give and empty yourself and at the same time learn how to receive as somebody's trying to empty their self, you're going to be in a Hamlet-like condition your whole life. Socrates had the same problem. Socrates is a great example of intellectual integrity, but Socrates never shed a tear. He never cried. Anybody who has never cried has never loved anybody. That's not a compliment, go through life and never shed a tear. Open yourself. Be vulnerable. That's what intimacy is. There is no mental health without cultivating the capacity to love, which is both to give and to receive. We got too many leaders who always want to speak and not enough leaders who want to listen. What do jazz musicians do? They don't proceed without listening, even when they're leading. You got to do both. So it is in relationships. So it is in social movements. So it is in churches, schools, mosques, temples. So it is on the block. So it is in the nightclub. So it is on the corner, in the alley. Because love could overflow in each and every one of those places. And trauma is precisely the attempt to break the back of any love motion. As my dear brother Coach began with those powerful, powerful poems, both the reflections as well as a very kind poem about myself, though, brother, you see. Be traumatized is to blame yourself. You see. Traumatized is paralysis of a self. Be traumatized to think that somehow your whole world has ended, when in fact it's unfinished, it's open-ended. There's a whole lot of possibility there as long as the winds of cultivated love, the winds of physical health, the winds of friendship, the winds of community are connected and in some ways helping you move along. Keep on keeping on. But how does your ROOTS constitute wind at your back? The interplay between the routes that you take and the roots that you have, and how you creatively appropriate those roots, because those roots are not static. And some of those roots got to go. All of tradition's not a good thing. Tradition can suffocate you and lead you to trauma. But the best of that same tradition can liberate you. So the question is, there's a difference between Curtis Mayfield and Rudy Ray Moore. We love both of them. One's obsessed with Dolomite, the other's obsessed with freedom. Same is true these days with the young folk. There are histories of black hedonists and narcissists and black thugs and black cowards and black gangsters. Every community has that. That's part of our roots too. But that's the worst of our roots. And the best of our roots, Ella Baker, Brenda Travis, Toni Morris, Irene West, Clifton West, Guy Wilson. That's the best of our roots. And that keeps us human, which means also it's not a function of skin pigmentation. Some folks say, I just got to discover my blackness so I can feel good about myself. Well, what version of blackness are you talking about? There's a whole lot of black folk out there. To me, all of them beautiful. Brother Clarence Thomas, he's a beautiful brother aesthetically, but I don't share a whole lot in common with him on a whole host of other things. You can't run him out of blackness. He's a beautiful black brother who chooses to usually be wrong. That's a critical judgment we make. That's different than Martin King. That's different than Malcolm X. That's different than Fannie Lou. But I know that's a long answer.
Speaking of the blues.
Ooh, yes.
What correlation and distinction do you make between the blues and black trauma?
They say the blues ain't nothing but a personal narrative of catastrophe lyrically expressed. They're thermometers rather than thermostats. It just reflects what's out there. The thermostat is going to shape what's out there. That's a different orientation. All of us stand under judgment. Each and every one of us. But if we lose sight of what the moral and spiritual standards are, then we become not just hypocrites, but we become gangsters.